But mostly the reason I bring up Robert Redford was because of his starring role in the great baseball movie. I would rank it not in my top two necessarily of baseball movies, but I rank it pretty high up there with all the greats, Eight Men Out, League of Their Own, Moneyball, Field of Dreams, and many more. But he played that role of Roy Hobbs, I think, great, and therefore I wanted to say it. Now, the only thing I question about it is every time he hit a home run, he seemed to break shit. Welcome to Wait, What? Sports Biz Chat with DP and McGee, the podcast that takes an often irreverent, sometimes cynical, and on occasion a serious look at the business of sports. I'm your co-host, 𝘕𝘳𝘳𝘁𝘗.
And I'm Tim McGee.
We are 2 weeks into the NFL season, and Tim, 2025 is clearly not going to be the year for our teams. One thing I'll say, at least the Jets got crushed by a good team this past weekend. Plus, you have the Dolphins in your division, which means that you have a chance at 2 wins. So what all that means to me is that the Cubs and Yankees are both still looking good for wild card slots. Of course, that's like prime jinx language, so I'm going to stop there and forget we ever mentioned that. Tim, what's on your mind?
Well, I want to go back to something we talked about last week, which was the situation with Kawhi Leonard and the Clippers and Steve Ballmer and whether or not they were trying to circumvent the salary cap by paying Kawhi Leonard for what in effect is alleged to be a no-show endorsement deal, $28 million from a company called Aspiration that was the team sponsor. Some new news has come to light since we spoke last week, which is that Steve Ballmer invested, in addition to his initial $25 million, invested in another $10 million at a time when Aspiration was bleeding cash, laying off employees, and starting what ultimately became its death spiral. So is every investor perfect in the picks they make and the risks they take and the investments that they make? No. But when you're the 8th or 9th richest person in the world and you throw good money after bad, it's going to raise some questions. I think that's fair to say. And that's the situation we find ourselves in now.
No doubt about it. Steve Ballmer appeared at an industry event, an SBJ event yesterday, I believe, or certainly this week, and is calmly denying all of the potential allegations. But last week there was a Board of Governors meeting. Adam Silver has impressed upon the ownership to let the investigation, which is underway, take its course and see where this goes. Ballmer is very much saying he welcomes this investigation, feels he's done nothing wrong as it relates to salary cap circumvention, and that one of the other things that Silver has said, while some have suggested that Silver needs to bring hammer down just for what, the appearances of this, he has said definitively that he's not going to act on circumstantial evidence. They're going to have to find something. But in addition to what you just said and the weird investing, there was another piece that, again, Pablo Torre and his podcast, Pablo Torre Finds Out, found that there is one minority investor in the Clippers.
Mm-hmm.
He owns 1% of the team, happens to be Steve Ballmer's Harvard roommate, a guy named Dennis Wong, which ties back to the story because Kawhi Leonard's, because we had this discussion last week, Kawhi Leonard's uncle, who gets involved in all this stuff, is actually Uncle Dennis. So another Dennis, Dennis Wong, somewhat out of nowhere, it seemed, invested $2 million as the company, to your point, was totally bleeding, not making payroll, or at least struggling to make payroll, invested $2 million right before a payment of about $1.98 million was due to Kawhi for this quote unquote no-show endorsement contract. One of the founders of Aspiration has said that had left the company, had said it was not a no-show contract. Now, that's easy to say, but the contract language, which Pablo Torre had, certainly suggests that it could easily be that. It had things that he was supposed to do, but it also said, if you don't want to do it, you don't have to do it. So that to me is a no-show endorsement contract. So there's a lot of suspicious things about this. And certainly they'll be easy now, based on what has gone public, for the law firm that is investigating to look into these things. But again, they'll have to tie Ballmer specifically to trying to circumvent this, and he's out publicly saying that they did nothing of the sort and that the two deals were completely unrelated. But and I'm making a funny face for those that are just listening to this. I'm making a really?
Yeah, a "wait, what?" face. I do like the way that Adam Silver is approaching this very methodically, has come out and stated pretty firmly that if it's found to be true that the consequences will be serious. It'll be interesting to see. I'm not sure if we talked about it on the air last week or off the air just amongst the two of us, but if Steve Ballmer is doing this, are other owners doing this? And then we have to look and say, okay, then what, how do they respond to this investigation? Do they come out in support of Adam Silver? Do they come out in support of Steve Ballmer? And I think all parties have to walk a very fine line right now. Adam Silver can't get too ahead of it because he works for the owners, but he is also the shepherd for the integrity of the game and the sport and the league and its players and teams. Whereas the owners need to be careful about supporting Steve Ballmer too vociferously if in fact he's found to have been guilty. At the same time, and maybe it's not this issue, but maybe it's something else they're concerned that somebody might shine a light on in the future that brings them into the spotlight. It's a very sort of Byzantine situation that's going on that will probably take months before it's resolved.
I think it is going to take some definite time to get this right and look into it. You and I we didn't necessarily speculate, but we talked about this idea that in this investigation, when you're using replay to go back and look at a rule,
Hindsight?
to see, right, are you opening back up anything else that took place in that play? And in this case, what we talked about was they're going to have to look at every free agent signing that's happened over the last however long and see if there were any weird endorsement deals that happened. And the reason I mentioned that was, Ballmer may be absolutely brilliant if he actually did this or somehow the Aspiration people figured it out and went to someone at the Clippers. They can't be the first people that have ever thought of it. It seems when you look at it laid out now saying, that's all it took to circumvent a salary cap situation, right? So I guess I would be surprised if it hadn't been thought of before. And we, said to see the first guy that's ever figured this out. Again, we're only saying what's been reported. We'll see. The investigation does have to play out. But I do think that, to your point, how the owners are reacting to this is going to be pretty interesting. Because on the surface, you'd say a lot of owners should be completely up in arms about this possibility.
Yeah, absolutely. And perhaps they will be if it's found to be true, because what he has done in effect is given his team a potentially significant advantage by circumventing the salary cap, which is there for a reason and which is one of the most onerous in terms of the implication it has for teams if they do go over, right, with the first skirt and the second skirt, so forth.
All right. As we said last week, there's certainly going to be plenty more to come on this. I think this is a moment. This is a moment for Adam Silver. It's a moment for the league. It's a moment for ownership and looking at what all this type of stuff means and what can be done. No matter what comes out of it, I think you're going to see some reforms, certainly in this league and probably looked at across other leagues to prevent this, especially ones that have hard caps. How to prevent even, the speculation that this is something that's going on.
Yeah. And we talked about also the fact that, the first major issue that he had to deal with when he became commissioner 10 years ago was Donald Sterling. And so it's sort of wild to think that the second biggest thing he's ever going to have to deal with, probably as a commissioner, but you never know what it's going to be, but it has to do with the same exact team.
Hey, Adam Silver's like going, how is this team the one causing me so many headaches?
Right. When you look at some of the other owners and some
The
of the other
Clippers.
personalities in the league, and, we can I think you and I could both probably name 2 or 3 owners we would probably higher on the list than Ballmer as to doing nutsy stuff.
Yeah, it was interesting because right out of the Board of Governors meeting as well, there's huge news coming out of the NBA. At least I think it was huge in the way they positioned with a complete reorganization of the league to focus more on fan engagement and international, which is interesting because it meaning focus on fan engagement with the idea of driving television interest, because that's one of the places the league during regular season certainly has suffered. There's a lot of news around the NBA. We've talked about all of that. But there have been some issues with whether people are interested in watching the product during a regular season. So they've made some what look to be on paper massive reorganizations. I'm not so sure that's the case. I did want to shout out to 2 past guests we've had, Kelly Flato and Carrie Tatlock, both of whom not only are still in good stead there, but I think, come out with positions of a responsibility that are even more significant. So hats off to both of them and everybody in that organization that I think will be part of this new focus. But there are some other changes in terms of their marketing role and what their focus will be on from a global standpoint.
Yeah, kudos to those 2 women, as you said, past guests, friends.
Well, it
Just
doesn't hurt that they're freaking awesome, by the
well,
way.
yeah, they're just great people, right? So,
Yeah.
it's nice to see good things happen to good people. As I said to my wife this morning, quoting the late, great Frank Burns, "It's nice to be nice to the nice."
Sticking on basketball, a lot of storylines still in the WNBA as they're a couple games into their playoffs right now. The CBA situation is going nowhere fast, it appears. I think your, concern or prediction that there would be a stoppage of one kind or another, I think is very real. And it seems like the owners are pushing back on this idea of not, because there's a bit of a movement to move them to the players to getting 50% of revenue, similar to what the NBA players is. I had contended that that's probably not where it needs to go, but it needs to be somewhere between 10%, which is actually a tiny bit more than they're getting now, and 50%.
Yeah, I think it needs to be done in a stepwise function. Maybe not this CBA, because let's keep in mind the league's been around over 25 years and has never made a dime. While the recent growth and explosion in interest, whether it be fans, media, sponsors, whatever, doesn't obviate the fact that they've lost money for all those years. And so that the the owners, the NBA, which has always been a huge investor in the league, they need to make back that investment before they put these women on a same level with the NBA in terms of sharing revenue. That's just my position and
Yeah.
my feeling.
Well, certainly, I think the deal needs to be one that has some sustainability to it, and the players have asked for something that that increases as the revenues grow. I don't think the owners get anywhere by talking about, do we, are we owed the money that we've sunk in? That's part of being a business owner, right? If you always talk about taking all the risk, which sometimes it's not always owner's money, it's someone else's money, and you get the reward on the sale, and the valuations have continued to go up. And so, speaking about value of the players, are those valuations going up because there's irrational exuberance in the ownership space in sports? Probably a little bit, but the players still are the product, and therefore I don't think you can discount them in terms of the value that they bring. And I think there has been, even with Caitlin Clark being injured, the numbers seem to continue to go well year over year. Obviously, there was a kind of a somewhat of a backtracking, I think, in the injuries. The Fever are in the playoffs, and
And they blew out the
yeah,
Dream, the second
right.
seeded Dream in game 1. I mean, it's and in the first round, it's best of 3.
Hmm.
Certainly, you can't count out Atlanta, but, you know, no Sophie Cunningham,
Well, I
no
think
problem.
that's.
No
Am I wrong
no
to?
Caitlin Clark, no
Am I
problem.
wrong to think that series is now 1-1? They won yesterday, and they
Atlanta
and
won?
they I
Okay,
think
I didn't
Atlanta.
see
I
it.
think Atlanta won the first game
And then they
because
blew them
I
out. Yes,
think.
yes, you're
Could
right,
be
you're
wrong.
right, you're right.
We'll check on that. Anyway, great to have those series potentially go to into 3-game series, and then of course the championship is a
Right,
5-game
and,
series. So
and then you have, the storyline with Paige Beckers, who had a fantastic season, won Rookie of the Year. 𝘈𝘰𝘁𝗁 𝘠𝘕 up in Minnesota.
Minnesota.
We've talked about her in relation to her founding Unrivaled, but she's had an amazing season. She's got a great shot at winning MVP. So there's some great storylines that are coming out of here. So it's not great in the sense that it's a positive story, but the story around Angel Reese and being suspended from her team for the comments that she made, not great. But my point is, people are talking about them. Whereas if an WNBA player had made those comments 3-4 years ago, probably would have gone largely unreported. So I think, I'm not going to sit here and defend Angel Reese. She's young. She probably has to learn some things, but I don't think anybody can question her passion for the game and her desire to win.
I think with the CBA negotiation, with this obvious continued look at things like attendance and television viewership, those things alone have put the W into a discussion of interesting storylines going on in the sports biz. I think the other one that we talked about recently, and there's follow-up on that, is the sale of the Connecticut Sun and what role the league and the league's governors have in preventing a sale. Because I think this one it has the potential to go to legal action and set precedent. Once we last left off, the Mohegan Tribe, the current owners of the Connecticut Sun, had agreed to sell the team to an investor that was going to move the team to Boston. That all seemed fine, and, well, owners, that happens. But the state got involved. Mark Lasry of Avenue Capital got involved. And the league big time got involved because they don't want this to happen. And now there are multiple options at play, including one where the league would take ownership, keep the team in Connecticut, or sell it to one of the pre-approved. And just to recap, the reason, I'm not saying it's necessarily a good one, a fair one, or a legal one, but the reason the league has opposed that deal and moved to Boston is that Boston never went through the approved expansion market process, whereas cities like Houston have and are would be in the market for a team. So that's, I think, where the league wants to go. They, I think, have only put up $250 million, and the deal to move to Boston was bigger than that. So this thing, who knows where it's going to end up? But the reason we talk about it on this show is because this has massive ripple effects, in my view, through other leagues and what it means to be in ownership and what the league can do when it comes to the sale of an asset like a sports team. My view is, because of the agreement that they're all in it together, they probably have quite a bit of say. The question is just how much, and could it prevent a more optimum sale? So we'll see where this one goes, but I do think it's quite a significant story coming out of the WNBA that has implications.
For sure. We got a couple more minutes before we're going to welcome our guest. You want to talk ratings for a little bit?
Always up for that.
So, U.S. Open ratings and attendance, I guess, is a more accurate description of what we're going to talk about. U.S. Open set a record of the most number of fans to come through the turnstiles, 1.14 million. Now, keep in mind, the tournament started a day earlier this year, so they had one extra day to sell tickets. So that had something to do with it. But you can't dismiss the popularity of this last of the majors in tennis. If that's not enough of a proof point, the men's final had 3 million viewers. It's up 82% from the year before. And certainly not shabby at all. The women's final, through 2.4 million, was up 50% from the year before, which is huge number. I mean, any sports league, team, event, network would love to have those types of numbers coming
Yeah,
out.
I think even with the advent of, and I always laugh when I say it, but that's what they're saying, big data from Nielsen. Anytime you see anything outside of single digits, we're talking significance, and these things are blowing that right out. Their average of 1.1 million across everything on ESPN, best since 2019. So yes, dare we say tennis is having one hell of a moment right now, even with the onslaught from, pickleball. The It's
How
been too
long?
long since we mentioned it,
Not
brother.
not long enough.
And we have these great storylines, particularly the Alcaraz Sinner storyline, the roster of U.S. women's players and a few on the men's side as well. I mean, if Ben Shelton had gone through another round or two on the U.S., for one of the top rated players, in men's tennis and another American, those U.S., and we're talking U.S. viewership. I have not looked at the global numbers, by the way.
And when you talk about the Carlos Alcaraz, Jannik Sinner situation, I assume you're talking about the news that came out after the tournament that Brooks Nader, who is a Sports Illustrated swimsuit model, you run in celebrity circles. The first person that comes to mind, Adam Derwitz, dated both Jennifer Aniston and Courtney Cox at different times.
Adam Duritz of Counting Crows fame.
Adam Derwitz, of Corner, yeah,
and that just is like rock stars.
right. Yeah, I mean, if there's any question. Anyway, by the way, I have a neighbor who dated him in college too. Very, very nice woman. So but she's not a celebrity.
Okay.
But anyway, Brooks Nader, former swimsuit model for Sports Illustrated, is reported to have dated both Sinner and Alcaraz during the U.S. Open at the same time. So brings a whole new meaning to the term day session and night session.
Like they went on dates, or we don't want to know.
I don't know.
It was all right.
I don't know I don't know the details, but the New York Post reported that she was dating both of these guys during the tournament at the same time. I don't know if it was unbeknownst to one another or not, but apparently Alcaraz and Sinner are not the only players in that relationship.
Right, yeah.
You got to give the woman props.
Man.
All right. So enough about tennis. And as great as those numbers were, the NFL reported that Chiefs-Eagles game is the highest rated NFL football games regular season since they started tracking ratings in 1987 or 1988. 33.8 million viewers. That's 10% of the population, David. You can't get 10% of the population to do anything.
No, it's going to be interesting. We're going to have to check in with our friend Ben Reiling, past guest,
who works at Nielsen, for those
right.
Yeah.
On how this is playing out, because these numbers, when you put it in terms of percentage of the population, seem a little crazy. Now,
ridiculous. Yeah.
I was glued to that game, I will admit, as someone that I grew up in the Philadelphia area. I used to be Eagles fan. Still am to a degree, and nothing against our past guest, Mark Donovan.
I'm laughing
you laugh
because,
all you want.
Because you have
I leap.
abandoned the Bears as quickly as I abandoned the Jets this year. And I don't blame you. I'm not blaming you. I'm just saying,
well,
all of a sudden you go from, bleeding black and orange to bleeding, green, white, and silver in a heartbeat.
It's actually a very, very dark blue, just to say. I have not abandoned the Bears, other than I think they've abandoned me.
Okay, all right, touché.
But I need something to feel positive about. The Eagles beating the Chiefs. The Chiefs now 0-2, which is panic situation, I guess, there, and the Eagles have two hard-fought wins. The thing that I want to know is, of the different, because they ran it like 6-7 times during the game, is which of the tush pushes, sponsored by Dude Wipes, was the highest rated of the tush pushes, because there seemed to be that much more focus on the tush push in this game because of what appears to be multiple occasions, the guards on the offensive line taking a little bit of a leap and everybody going, that's why it's so successful, which there may be some truth to that. But I also noticed, as an Eagles fan, that it seems like the defensive line was certainly in the neutral zone as well. So I'm not so sure that's that big of a thing. I think they're just really good at doing it. Anyway, I get why people are tired of it. I'm just saying, someone figure out a way to stop it.
Yeah, I don't know if they'll get the opportunity to do that. I think it's going to be outlawed. I mean, it was almost outlawed this past season. I think you needed 24 owners. 22. They got 22. I think if they continue to have success, I think there's going to be a bigger backlash. That's just my thought.
If it gets banned, it was from Sunday night's game.
Mhm.
That's what's going to be the thing that turns it over. I don't think they can't change that rule in the middle of the
No,
season,
no,
can
no,
they?
no. What I'm
Okay,
saying
yeah.
is, in the offseason, I think
Yeah, I think
they'll bring
I
it up for a
agree.
vote again.
You've heard it here. We might have to make it as a prediction if it doesn't come up before. I think we're both predicting that it gets banned after this season. All right.
So what do you think?
Yeah,
Take a
let's do it. Excited about this guest.
It's time for our guest.
So we are back, and we are thrilled to welcome our guest. Mark Wright is one of the most powerful and influential people in sports and media. As the Vice President of Media and Sponsorships at AT&T, he controls one of the largest media spends in the industry and oversees one of the biggest and best sponsorship portfolios in the world. And he comes to AT&T after, if it wasn't enough, the great success he's had there. He spent 18 years at AB InBev, where he was last Vice President, Media, Sports, and Entertainment Marketing. Mark, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Tim. Great to join you guys.
Okay, so let's get started. You've spent virtually your entire career working in planning and buying media. What's the biggest changes you've seen since you started out in this space?
So I might start, I guess, at one of the questions I think you'll ask later, which is I got my break out of school at University of Tennessee in communications advertising at an ad agency, like a lot of folks, right, in this business. They hire people out of college, they give them a shot. And thankfully, that still goes on today to a certain degree. But anyway, so I started working for a company that's long since been bought, probably 3 different times, Bozell, Jacobs, Kennedy, and Eckhart. You guys probably remember that agency, right? But anyway, that was in Dallas, actually, of all places. And so my roots in this business are as a media planner. I mean, they gave me a shot, and that's kind of where I built my skill set as a media person. So I go way back on the basic kind of tools of what is Media 101 and how to build a media plan and how to then invest, on behalf of a client. The biggest changes, wow. So, I mean, this is 35 years. I would say in general, right, the biggest changes have been just this proliferation and fragmentation, right, of choice, of media choices. That would be, I would say, part one of that answer. I remember a guy by the name of Tony Ponturo hired me. You guys probably heard his name. I actually was on his podcast not too long ago. And back then, he used to, tell wholesalers at the time at AB about there used to be only 3 networks, and now there's, all these able systems. It's like, okay, that those days are long behind us, and now I guess it's such choice with streaming, fragmentation, viewership fragmentation, and then I guess the second part of that answer, Tim, is what I would call digital real-time programmatic bidded buying. This is not news to you guys. You're in the business, but that has complicated it to a certain degree. It's put different challenges in place in terms of transparency and what we pay for what we get. But I'm not a naysayer on that. I think it actually has offered all kinds of upside to clients to target specifically who they're trying to reach.
Appreciate that answer. A couple things. Number one, sorry about that tough Tennessee loss last
Dude,
weekend.
you have
Sorry to
no
bring it up,
idea.
but just have to because that's what I do.
Yeah.
Second, I feel this is like a huge honor. I feel like I'm looking at T sponsorship royalty here with Tim on, with my co-host.
Started is your partner in crime, Tim.
Mark wanted to hire me back because he needs somebody to carry his bags.
He didn't use
Oh no, he did not want to hire me back. That is a joke. That is
you
not.
never got on board with the headquarters.
Well, that is a podcast for another
Yeah.
day.
Although he hints at such things all the time, it seems, but we
No,
won't go
no,
there.
no, no, we're not gonna listen.
All right. Let's get back on track, 'cause this could go bad very quickly. All right, you've worked for some of the most iconic brands, ones that both spend significantly in media and obviously have sponsorship. How do you ensure, and how important do you feel that role is at those iconic places, that you and your team are actually serving as stewards for the brand? And how do you ensure that you are good stewards for the brand?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's at the core of what we're responsible for, right? As executives, as employees that are lucky enough, in my opinion, to be a part of marketing and specifically media and sponsorship. I mean, ultimately, the way I see this and answer this kind of question is that we keep the brand and the enterprise at the forefront, right? I mean, when you think about what sponsorship is, we talk about sponsorship for a second. It is about this kind of association rub, right? Of trying to build brand value and enterprise, the company value. Some categories, right? Like Anheuser-Busch, or packaged goods, let's just go with that, have a bigger emphasis on the brand. I always like to say one of the first meetings I was off sites at AB, Tony had his his leadership team together. We were actually in Washington D.C. We had a McKinsey guy come in. It's like, what do you think is the most important asset you own? And these are the marketing people. We went around the table, et cetera, et cetera. Everybody's like, the brewing process, the 100+ year heritage. He's like, I can't believe it. Wrong. He goes, it's your brand. It's like, otherwise, all you have is suds in a brown bottle. I was like, damn right. I mean, and so without the marketing and the associative, I'll call it upside that we are responsible for in terms of investing in that association, that's what you have. I mean, each category again is different. Alcohol, I would not put in that category exactly, but it is, I would say, the parallel on how uber competitive it is the same, right? I mean, you have basically a 3 brand race like you do in many categories in the United States, and trying to lift that kind of brand love out of what you do with your investment is of the utmost importance, and that's what they hold us responsible for.
AT&T Stadium, presenting sponsorship of college football championship, the AT&T Pebble Beach Pro-Am, NCAA corporate champion, the Masters. The list goes on and on. These are just some of the deals that you've been involved with and manage in your time at AT&T. Take our listeners through what your strategy is when it comes to sports sponsorships at AT&T.
Well, Tim, you would know this. You were part of some of these. I would say it shifted a little bit over time, but at the core of it, right, is as a company that's in the connectivity business. That is what we do, is connect people. And this sounds like a bit of a sell line because it is. These sports in the United States of America is about passion. I mean, take David, your example of Tennessee. I was actually in Chicago for the weekend with 2 of my kids and a bunch of friends, and I mean, you talk about passion. I mean, it wasn't just Tennessee game, right? It was a Notre Dame A&M game. It was everything going on, and so connecting people, especially now, is the introduction of the iPhone and smartphones in general to the passion point is what we do. I mean, that is what we do. Now, is it all about sports? Not necessarily. But in the United States, it consumes a significant amount of those passion points, and connecting fans and customers, either current customers or prospective customers, to those passion points is our responsibility. And hopefully connecting them through enough of these, what I would call iconic platforms, is what we're responsible for doing. Does that make sense? That
Makes
is
total
a bit
sense.
of a, like, connectivity, connecting changes everything is kind of our sell right now. But that is what we do at the
Right.
core of it.
Well, I think that, AT&T with its tagline that speaks very specifically to the service that it provides, but speaking to it in a broader way, in a way that tends to be more tangible, does make sense to how you apply sponsorship to that. So no, that was a fantastic explanation. So thanks for that. You talked earlier about the advent of programmatic buying and the importance of it and all that.
Yeah.
A piece, I think, of what I wanted to ask next, which is how can sponsorships deliver against objectives, against goals today in ways that they maybe couldn't in the past? And I guess conversely to that, what are some of the challenges of it being able to achieve those objectives?
Yeah, I think I'm going to come back to this thing about brand and brand love and affinity for a brand. The advent of technology is only going to help us determine which one of those does the best job of that. I mean, we ask, we survey, we get a read on which platforms do a better job of lifting brand awareness, preference, affinity, essentially, right? And in the end, what's going to drive business for the brand? You guys have been doing this a long time. You know that sponsorships in general is probably the hardest one to get a read on in terms of an actual sales delivery, right? Because in the end, that is what it's all about. But we have models that try to get at that. We've hired a lot of smart people on the outside now with the advent of AI to help us get to that. You can get to it because in the end, that is what it's about. But these kind of associations are really about customer appreciation. And you know that in sponsorship, you can find ways to take care of your customer, whether it is making sure that people are waiting in line at the Final Four who are an AT&T customer can get to the front of the line for a autograph from, you name it. And those kind of things over and over again, platform after platform, activation after activation, hopefully have a positive rub on our customer base and on prospective customers who see it and go, "That's pretty cool." They take care of their customers in that way.
Given the rising cost of sponsorships, I've never seen a renewal proposal that comes in at a lower
That
price
was
tag,
down.
right? Yeah. How have the expectations of your leadership, yourself, and even up to the board level changed over the years?
Well, I don't know that sponsorship is any different than anything else, in the US economy. It cost of just about everything has increased, right? There are increases on the media we buy as well. The expectations are always there to make sure we're delivering on behalf of the company and the business. That's the one thing I always, I've been fortunate enough to be able to work in an industry and at a craft that I actually love from the get-go. Once I got into media, I kind of knew this is what I want to do. Um, and specifically sports media, and that's why I pursued Anheuser-Busch. I grew up in Columbia, Missouri, but St. Louis has been our home, and they were spending a lot of dough, right, in media. So I knew this is kind of where we wanted to go with it. I don't think anybody's expectations are any higher now than they were 20 years ago. You are still held responsible for showing a return on investment, whether that investment was $10 or 100. I don't think that expectation has changed at all. The pressure builds, right, as a public company, as you know, Tim, but that's always been there. To me, that has always been there.
Yeah, you said 10 to 100, which gives a wide range, but as was pointed out, you never see any of these things go backwards. They're like television rights deals. So thanks for taking us through that.
I would add one other thing to that as I think about it here a little bit. The other thing in this category is beyond what it costs for the official marketing partner of fill in the blank. Our competitors are in that race at a very high rate of speed. In fact, their speed is in many places is accelerated even beyond ours. So competition investing and shareholders expecting, the board expecting you to stay at a comparable rate of speed, you're not going to quibble over whether it costs 10 or 15. You have to compete. And I guess that's the case in many categories. But telco, wow, this is part of what I love about it. I mean, this is a very competitive category.
Yeah, that's obvious. And the brands are, you can obviously Verizon, T-Mobile, super, super aggressive in that space. And while I don't think any of us ever wanted to do sponsorships just for defensive reasons, because you want to go out and engage those customers in an offensive way, you have to be aware of what they're doing and what they're doing to capture customers.
Completely.
And so, yeah, there have to be considerations as to where else can you mine those customers. Appreciate you bringing that up, because you're right. It's a very visible to any of us in the industry, very interesting competition in the telco space.
Well,
Yeah,
as they say, the best defense is a good offense, right?
Yeah. Or, make sure you don't lose what you have.
Good point. Okay, we've actually come to the end of the main section. We normally, Mark, ask 2 questions of our guests. We're going to let you skip the first one because you did such a good job answering it, which is, where'd you get your start, in the first question we
Yeah.
asked. So we're going to skip to the second question, which is a little more challenging and we think hopefully more worthwhile for our audiences that listen to us, including a lot of younger people looking to get into the business. So that question is, what one piece of advice would you give to someone looking to break into the sports business?
In the sports business.
In the broadest possible sense of
Yeah.
the sports business,
Okay.
on the media
Uh,
side, yeah.
I'm with you, David. I think on the sports question, and I say this a lot to young people who I talk to who want to get a start in the business, who are getting out of college or what have you, or just out of college, is the sports aspect of it. Don't Uh, especially don't be the person who says, "I wanna get a start. I see myself in the field," because so much love sports. Who doesn't? I mean, to a certain degree, that is not gonna distinguish you necessarily, right? It helps, but it ain't gonna, in most cases, not gonna separate you from the pack. It's what is it that we can do to help build a brand or a business? Understand the business. How do we make money? How do we sell stuff? How do we generate a profit? What is our margin? Understand the financials behind a given brand or company, and then how this association with the United States soccer team or the National Basketball Association, or just buying a spot on the Super Bowl might help drive that business. If you come in there with that, man, I watched this game and that, it isn't, that's not going to be enough. So understand how sports, or the business of sports, can help drive a business or brand. I guess the other part of that question, and I've given this answer before, but I still think it makes a heck of a lot of sense to me, is for young people getting in, don't be the person that on a staff that is always complaining, whining about. Now, you've been there for a while. I don't mean on your first week. Who the heck's going to do that? Be the person who solves stuff, who gets stuff accomplished. And I mean, I know that's who I look to, is people who can problem solve. And I don't care what task it is. In fact, it helps just doing the very basic tasks correct to begin with. I'm not going to hand you the negotiation on Super Bowl or the NFL in your first year. So just make sure you actually get the competitive report nailed. Nail the little stuff first. Eventually, a management team will notice the people who don't whine, who accomplish all the small stuff and are problem solvers.
That is fantastic advice, and I don't know if we've heard that before. Don't whine.
We-
No, no, I'm not being facetious. It's don't come to me with a problem. Come to me with a solution. Right? Is I think what every leader or manager wants from people that are working for them. It shows initiative. It shows maturity. It shows all the things that you
Mhm.
want. That whose career you would like to see grow and proceed and develop. So, Mark, with that, I want to thank you again for coming on and joining us. It was great to have you. I know how
Sure.
busy you are down there in Dallas, so thank you very much.
How long you guys been doing this?
This is our 127th episode.
Okay.
So for a bit, we've yeah,
When did we start? 2021, I think.
we started
Wow.
2022, January
2022.
2022, and we had a couple years when I was doing too much travel, probably, where it was harder to do as regularly. But we've come back in force this year, and you, Mark, have been part of a great lineup of guests that we've had this year, and certainly can't thank you enough for joining us.
Well, you're very welcome, bud. Pleasure to join you guys. Wish you all the best.
Thank you.
All right, man.
We are back. Thank you again to Mark Wright, Vice President of Media and Sponsorships at AT&T. Another great guest, David. I mean, we are so lucky to get some of the people that we get from this industry to come on the show, and Mark is certainly no exception. So now's the time in the show where we look forward, we give shout outs. What's on your mind, my friend?
There's a couple mostly shout outs that I want to do. Number one, a good friend of mine, Sarah Cummins, just got named CEO of World Sevens Football, a women's soccer venture, a new one featuring invitation-based tournaments for elite teams. One of the reasons I bring this up is we had been trying to get Sarah on the show in her role as SVP at the WTA Ventures, which she has just recently left to take this role. She's awesome, and she has promised me that she will now come on in this new role to talk about this exciting new venture of World Sevens. You know, a quicker, more exciting form of football, featuring obviously 7 people on each side. So excited to hear more about that, and wanted to give her a shout out. Secondly, we haven't talked about LIV necessarily in a while, but I saw last week that Greg Norman is finally leaving LIV in full capacity. And my thought when I saw that was, what's he been doing? I mean, clearly Scott O'Neill came on board early in the year, maybe late last year, to basically run it. You know, Norman was in essence out. I don't know. It just made me laugh a little, like he's saying goodbye. What's he been doing?
The house guest that wouldn't leave.
Yeah, right. And then the last thing, because I do think it's time for, we haven't done it in a while, a movie time. I think if that's where you're going, a heartfelt rest in peace to Robert Redford, one of our great actors and directors and people committed to the arts in all its forms, and environmentalists. But mostly the reason I bring up Robert Redford was because of his starring role in the great baseball movie. I would rank it not in my top 2 necessarily of baseball movies, but I rank it pretty high, up there with all the greats, 8 Men Out, League of Their Own, Moneyball, Field of Dreams, and many more. But he played that role of Roy Hobbs, I think, great, and therefore I wanted to say it. Now, the only thing I question about it is every time he hit a home run, he seemed to break shit. Like he broke the clock, and then he crushed the lights so much that they started a fireworks show at the end of that movie. But that end of that movie, which was different than the book ending, by the way, Barry Levinson took it in a different direction, but one of the most iconic endings to a movie, and certainly one of the most heroic endings to a movie, certainly a sports movie you'll see.
Dramatic scores.
Yeah.
As the bed for that. Well, this is the reason why we need to sort of talk before we do that, because that was going to be my shout out as well. But I want to follow me here. I'm going to pull it together. I am reading now an all-time classic, The Great Gatsby, by F. Scott Fitzgerald, and I'm going to tie together the last 2 things you talked about. Robert Redford obviously playing Jay Gatsby to Mia Farrow's Daisy Buchanan in the original film version, Sam Waterston playing Nick Carraway. Anyway, classic book. I'm rereading it now, and I love it. Anyway, in the book, they talk about all of these parties that were held at the Gatsby estate and these people who would never leave. Greg Norman would have fit very well in West Egg as one of the guests at Gatsby's party. Anyway, I digress. But yes, a great loss for the movie industry. My personal favorite role was Johnny Hooker to Paul Newman's Henry Gondorff in The Sting. To me, that is the perfect movie. To me. But anyway, I'm not looking forward.
And it won the Oscar deservedly, I believe, for Best Picture.
Certainly for best score by Marvin Hamlish with The Entertainer and
There you
other
go.
ragtime music. I don't have a lot to look forward to this weekend. I mean, the race in New Hampshire is about it. I commented on LinkedIn the other day that the only benefit of being a New York Jets fan is that I have my fall Sundays back already, and here we are sitting at September 17th. So thank you, New York
Yeah,
Jets.
I didn't really either. Obviously, WNBA playoffs continue, and certainly we are on the precipice of NHL and NBA season starting, and we are down to it. Our teams are looking good, by the way, not to bring that up again and re-jinx, but Yankees and Cubs looking good for their wild card slot. So there's a little, the Cubs have been playing well again, which is nice.
So with that, let's close. Thank you again to Mark Wright. Thank you to David Yu for making this so much fun. Thank you, of course, most of all to our listeners. All things on the podcast can be found at dpandmcgee.com. But if you want to look for the podcast, we are on Spotify, we are on Apple, we are wherever you find your podcasts. Until next week, he's DP, I'm McGee, and we'll talk soon.